I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, more regulatory and health concerns for Juul. Bloomberg reporting the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is now investigating the link between e-cigarettes and seizures. Plus, my exclusive interview with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. 2 years into the job, he comments on the path to profitability, how the ride-hailer will fare in a trade war, and former employee Anthony Levin, who's been formally charged by the federal government for stealing trade secrets from Alphabet. We've also got another Bloomberg exclusive. We'll hear from a top Huawei executive about what the U.S. is losing out on as the Chinese telecom giant remains on a blacklist. But first to our top story, shares of tobacco giant Altria dropping in trading Thursday. This after the Dow Jones reported that the U.S. Federal Trade Commission is investigating the marketing practices of Juul Labs. Altria has invested $13 billion into the popular e-cigarette maker. Regulators, however, are now investigating whether Juul engaged in deceptive marketing, including targeting minors or using influencers. In addition, Bloomberg discovered that Juul was named in documents by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration as it investigates whether e-cigarettes can trigger seizures. Joining us to discuss, the co-author of that scoop, our Bloomberg News healthcare policy reporter, Anna Edney, and in studio here, Bloomberg Tech's Lizette Chapman, who covers Juul for us. So, Anna, I want to start with you. What exactly is the FDA investigating?
Well, they've gotten some reports from people, that this has happened to, who say, they've had seizures, and that Juul was one of the e-cigarettes that some of these people putting reports in used. They said just recently, the FDA, that there have been 127 reports of seizures that are possibly linked to e-cigarettes, and what they haven't said is what devices were used in this. And what we found out was, to start this whole investigation, the reports that they were looking at were linked to the Juul devices. So,
Lizette, obviously this is coming at an interesting time. You've got not just the FDA investigating here, but also now the FTC reportedly investigating. What does this mean for Juul?
This is the latest in a series of scrutiny on this company. The CDC just came out with a really damaging report showing that there were 193 cases of serious lung disease and one death that vaping had caused, that they were investigating that. So we've got the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, we've got the Food and Drug Administration, and we've got the, Federal Trade Commission, all looking closely at this new product, which until now has gone largely unregulated, with deadlines being pushed from year to year. And again, this comes just a week before a whole new bunch of devices are going to hit the market by the parent company, Philip Morris International.
Right, so Philip Morris, Big Tobacco, has its own e-cigarette products. This company called IQOS, they're coming out with a whole range of new devices.
Exactly. Which
are approved by the FDA.
They did get approval in April. And, Philip Morris and Altria split from each other about a decade ago. And now, just after all of these reports came out this week, it became clear that they acknowledged that they wanted to recombine forces in time to help launch this new type of e-cigarette device.
Meantime,
which has been tested, or which has been tried since 2014 in other markets around the world. U.S., it'll come next week.
We just yesterday interviewed a researcher who was part of a study that concluded that e-cigarettes are no safer than traditional cigarettes. Take a listen to what he had to say.
To know whether vaping truly causes the same lung disease as smoking, you're going to have to wait 30 years. And frankly, especially when there's young kids vaping, I'd rather not take the risk. So, all the data is very strong. There is a very strong association between lung disease and protease levels. And vaping increases proteases, so people are at risk of getting lung disease.
So lung disease is one thing, Anna. Seizures are another. Tell us a little bit more about what the reports that the FDA has been getting about seizures.
Well, there were 3 of them that the FDA focused on really early on when they were just starting to look at this in October, that we learned from these internal FDA documents. And there were 2 of them that were from parents of teenagers. They were both boys. They were 15 and 16. They were separate reports. But the gist of them was that the boys had been using a Juul. They inhaled. One of the mothers said that her son had an aura and felt like a shadow was coming after him, and then started convulsing. And he doesn't remember the rest. She ran upstairs to try to help him out, and the ambulance came, and the paramedics found a Juul under the unconscious child. So those are the kind of reports that we're seeing. And she said they went to the ER. They've talked to a lot of people in the healthcare community, and a lot of them agreed that Juul was the reason that this happened.
You got 2 moms here just shaking their heads. Lizette.
Yeah. Well, it's curious. I mean, just listening to what Anna just was saying there. This comes, even as the FDA approved this. A new type of device, which it held back from giving a full stamp of approval saying, hey, it's safer than cigarettes. In fact, the FDA went out of its way to make 2 statements in approving the IQOS that's going to hit the shelves next week, which is specifically, number 1, that it will not say that it's any safer than cigarettes. It's not any less risky. And number 2, because it's so similar to cigarettes, they're not going to allow Philip Morris to advertise it on TV or on radio.
Meantime, we also spoke with the North Carolina Attorney General, who has sued Juul, sued multiple e-cigarette companies, specifically with regard to their marketing and attempts to get young people using these products. Take a listen to North Carolina Attorney General Josh Stein.
The FDA should ban these products when they are not targeted to adults. If an adult wants to buy it, if they want to buy a tobacco flavor, menthol flavor, I got no problem. That's their right, and if it helps them get off cigarettes, fine. But what's happening is children are the ones buying a large number of these products.
Quickly, Anna, what is the FTC investigating when it comes to the marketing of these products?
And it's not just the FTC, also the FDA is looking into marketing. There's a House committee in Congress that's looking into Juul's marketing practices. They all want to know whether they deliberately targeted kids, because obviously kids got really interested in these devices. They're extremely popular among underage vapors who shouldn't have these in their hands anyway. And they're trying to find out, how much Juul actually targeted them, if they did at all, and whether they knew that this was something that kids might pick up.
All right, well, lots to continue to follow, and I know both of you will be doing that. Bloomberg's Anna Edney and Lizette Chapman, thank you both.
Thank you.
Sticking with regulation, but this time in Europe, the head of France's antitrust unit, Isabel De Silva, has largely played second fiddle to her EU counterparts since she was appointed in 2016. But with a shuffle of the EU's top technocrats on the horizon, that might be about to change. Caroline Connon has the story from Paris.
Over the years, Margrethe Vestager has become known as the nemesis of big tech in Europe. She's fined Google more than $9 billion. Her term is about to end in the next few weeks. But a new woman could become the most feared antitrust regulator on the old continent. Her name is Isabel De Silva. She's 49 years old, and she has been the head of France's antitrust regulator since 2016. And she's about to enter a more assertive phase of her mandate. Speaking to Bloomberg at her Paris office, she says she has set her sights on Facebook and Apple's forays into online payments. She also has big concerns about digital assistants such as Google's Home and Amazon's Echo. De Silva also said her team is planning very active investigations by the end of this year or early next year into online advertising, which could, of course, also impact US internet giants. France has already started targeting the so-called GAFA with a 3% tax on national digital revenues, a tax that will remain in place until a more global agreement has been reached at the OECD level. That's what the French President Emmanuel Macron told Donald Trump over the weekend at the G7 in Biarritz. And in France, as long as De Silva is in charge of the antitrust regulator, US big tech could be targeted faster in France than at the EU level. In Paris, Caroline Conan, Bloomberg News.
Coming up, it's been 2 years since Dara Khosrowshahi took the helm at Uber. In a Bloomberg exclusive, he tells us how the company has changed under his reign and his vision for the future as the stock trades near an all-time low. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio, listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Two years ago, Uber's infamous CEO Travis Kalanick was forced to resign after a series of scandals. Former Expedia chief executive Dara Khosrowshahi was brought in to clean up and rebuild the company's reputation. Since then, he's brought in new management and pushed the company beyond ride-sharing, but it hasn't been an entirely smooth ride. A big flashy IPO in May sparked excitement, but ultimately investors were not impressed, and the stock has been regularly trading below its IPO price since. I sat down with the Uber CEO for an exclusive and wide-ranging conversation and began by asking if he'd made the right choice in taking the job.
We have resolved all of the governance conflicts that the company had. There were many legal issues that the company was involved with as well. We got SoftBank in as a partner, and you want SoftBank to be behind you and a big partner and a big investor. And we have a great investor base. We've taken the company public, and the company revenue, gross bookings have grown 75% since I joined. We now have a path to profitability, I believe. So while we've had bumps on the road, and every adventure has bumps on the road, I like where we are, and I especially like the position that we're in now for the next years.
There have been bumps on the road, and despite all the negative stories, Uber, Lyft, ride-sharing companies have been transformational. The big question for you is, can Uber be as transformational over the next decade as it has been over the last decade?
I think so. I mean, really what Uber has done is brought transportation and opportunity at this point to what we believe is a small segment of population. Listen, we've got over 4 million driver partners all over the world, which is a huge number, and it's unparalleled. But we want Uber to be available to everybody. And what we're doing now is going into the next step of introducing other transportation choices to Uber. We've always gone with pool, but for example, we're testing buses in Cairo now to even bring the price of Uber down to the next level, $1, $1.50, etc. We're introducing bikes and scooters for personal electric mobility, so that essentially any way that you want to get around your city, we're going to be there for you. It'll be mostly Uber goods, but we'll also have other third parties such as transit, such as one of our partners, Lime, as well. Any way you want to get around, we want Uber to be there. And if you want food, if you want even local commerce, which I think we will power, Uber Eats and some of our other services will be there for you as well.
So I guess the question is, can Uber be so transformational and stop losing money? I mean, the prices sound very attractive, but can you create a good business where the rides are $1, $1.50?
Yes. So we are taking our rideshare business. If you, our CFO talked about it, Nelson, this last quarter. If you look at our rideshare business, it covered our overhead less about $100 million. And so the rideshare business itself is turning quite profitable, and we believe that the profits of the rideshare business not only are going to grow top line, but we believe that you're going to grow bottom line as well. And then there are other businesses, Eats, autonomous, freight, etc. These are extraordinary opportunities that we're funding, but I do believe that we're going to prove to our investors that we can take on a serial basis big parts of our business, turn them profitable, use those parts of our business to fund investments in other areas.
Still, there are execution issues. You just had your biggest quarterly loss ever, $5.2 billion. The stock has been trading below its IPO price much more often than not. Investors seem to love shorting it. You've got hiring freezes on various teams. You've fired some of your, or at least some of your top hires have left. So you said that you believe Uber can be profitable, but how confident and how quickly can Uber be profitable? How confident are you that Uber can be profitable, and how quickly?
Yeah, I'm very confident. So I think the losses that we reported, it was a $5 billion loss from an accounting perspective. If you live in accounting world, that's a big loss. I live in the real world. And actually in the real world, our EBITDA losses, 656, were lower than Q1, and we're on a good path in terms of our EBITDA losses as well. But you're absolutely right. None of this is going to be easy. All of this is going to take excellent execution from all of our teams, marketing, technology, etc. And we are going to be demanding our employees to be doing even more with less and to execute incredibly effectively in order for us to grow the top line and the bottom line as well.
So is pricing the main lever that you pull to profitability, or are there other drivers?
Scale. It's getting big when you've got over 1 billion rides per quarter and you've got trips growing at 35% on a year-on-year basis. We think we can use technology to be much more efficient. For example, instead of now you're having to email a call center agent or call a call center agent if you have issues, you can just do it in the app. These are technology innovations that allow customers to have a better experience, and at the same time they bring down costs. So the combination of growing top line still over 30%, technology innovation to delight the customer and take costs down at the same time, and then good old-fashioned efficiency, making sure that our corporate costs don't grow as fast as our revenue. All of those together give you a formula to get to profitability.
Coming up, more of my exclusive conversation with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. He weighs in on trade secret theft charges against ex-Uber engineer Anthony Levandowski next. This is Bloomberg. Earlier this week, former Uber engineer Anthony Levandowski pleaded not guilty to charges of stealing self-driving car technology from Alphabet's Waymo unit. The 33-count indictment by the U.S. federal government adds a new criminal chapter to the saga surrounding Waymo's civil claims of trade secret theft against Uber. This was just one of the many legacies that Dara Khosrowshahi inherited when he took the top job. I asked him if he still feels the weight of previous leadership.
You need different kinds of management for different times in the development of a company. Listen, every management has their faults. I've got my faults, and every management team at the time has their faults, but the fact is they built a great company, and now they've handed it to me, and I've got to take that great company and make it even greater. I think I'm up for the job, and while they made their mistakes, the fact is that they built a great brand that had weaknesses and has incredible strengths. It's my job to take it to the next level.
Anthony Levandowski, the guy who ran the trucking business that Uber bought, was just charged with stealing self-driving technology from Google, stealing trade secrets. What do you make of those charges?
I wasn't here when we brought Anthony on board. But what I do know is that we went to incredible depths to make sure that any information that Anthony might have acquired from Google, and it sure looked like he didn't make it over to our company. That was our responsibility, and I think we were incredibly diligent in making sure that we were not guilty of anything that could be nefarious one way or the other. We think that when you build, you got to build the right way. Anthony's an incredibly talented person. It didn't work out. But I do think that we did the right thing within these walls.
Now, the person who was here and spearheaded that acquisition, and which might cost Uber $100 million and has already cost some credibility, is still on the board, Travis Kalanick. I asked you this on IPO day, but I feel like I have to ask it again. Do you question Travis's position on the board?
I think that, I am going to live in the here and now. Travis has an incredible amount of historical knowledge about the company. He's incredibly bright, as are our other board members, and I use him at the board. He's a very strong advisor, and His background of the company is incredibly useful, and I think he's supportive. Ultimately now we're a public company, and the shareholders are going to get to pick their own board, and that governance process will take care of itself going forward.
So you talk to him often?
I talk to him usually during board meetings and once in a while offline, absolutely.
But he's on the board for now?
He's on the board for now, and he's going to be on the board tomorrow.
So let's talk about the future then. To those who say that Uber is a ride-sharing and food delivery company, what is Uber's next big idea?
I think that the ideas that we have right now in this building are plenty big ideas. We've got ride-sharing, we've got food delivery, we've got micromobility, we've got autonomous, we've got freight, revolutionizing how truckers move around and how shippers ship product all over the world. We've got Elevate as well. We have an enormous number of big ideas, and now it's execution time.
So where do you think most of the technological innovation is happening at Uber?
It is happening all over. What's unique about our business is that we are a combination of the digital and the physical, and the two coming together in unique ways. So we have very interesting, for example, machine learning algorithms that are looking at supply and demand, live supply and demand in a city, what riders are looking for and where they're located, and then giving our drivers guidelines as to where to go in order to meet that demand. This matching of supply and demand in a dynamic way, and the pricing that we have, is something that's unique. We continue to innovate there, and then we innovate in very, very different spots such as Elevate as to how we can bring together different modes of transportation and tie them together, walking, driving, to helicopter, for example, now to JFK.
So you're in charge of not just visualizing the future of transportation, but trying to get there and create that future. When you look into the future, what does the future of transportation look like? I mean, obviously you have Google and Tesla and traditional automakers and flying cars and helicopters, as you say. How is this all going to come together and be different?
Well, we think we can bring it together. I believe that we can have that singular app where every morning when you wake up, any way that you want to get from point A to point B, we can give you the information that is relevant to you with live pricing, inventory, etc. We now have mass transit in the app. So we're going to tell you mass transit, you can take a subway, you can take a bus, you can take an Uber, you can take a pool, and if it's a long enough trip, you can take an Elevate as well. We are uniquely positioned as a company to have all that information together, and we can do the same thing for transportation, we can do the same thing for local commerce, and with East restaurants are only the beginning, and we can do the same thing for logistics.
And we'll have more of our exclusive interview with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi after the break, including how Uber will fare in a possible recession, in a trade war, and of course, the future of Uber Eats. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Earlier in the show, we brought you the first two parts of my exclusive conversation with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. We've heard him talk about Uber's path to profitability and what it's been like tackling deep-seated cultural issues at the company. In this final part, we talk about the newer areas of business like Uber Eats, autonomy, e-scooters. Plus, how will Uber fare if the economy slows down? Why he thinks Uber is recession-proof. Take a listen.
The consumer right now in the U.S. is very strong. We're a very global company. The majority of our transactions actually are outside of the U.S. So we really look at global growth. To the extent that global growth slows down, that could be a negative for us. Although if global growth slows down, we're going to have more driver partners also wanting to come onto the platform because we expose very, very flexible labor opportunities. So I do think that the growth of the company is such that we're going to be relatively resistant to any macro slowdown, and we're certainly not seeing any slowdown with the U.S. consumer as of yet.
So what's plan B? if we're in a full-blown trade war?
Yeah.
We've heard about investing in Vietnam or Brazil. What is, what's the backup plan?
We're an asset-light company, right? So we don't actually have to go out and buy cars, et cetera. We'll obviously be wary and make sure that our driver partners can source vehicles in an economical way. Many of them source vehicles through the second-hand. They'll source used vehicles, so to speak. So I don't think this trade war, we certainly haven't felt it, unless in very small parts of the business where we're importing bikes, for example, there's some additional expense there. But it's not having a material effect on the company, and we're very confident of our growth over the next few quarters, trade war or no trade war.
So you've got a food delivery business, a trucking business, e-bikes, scooters, buses, self-driving cars, flying cars, food delivery, Uber, health.
Transportation of every kind.
You've asked the public to think about Uber like the Amazon of transportation, but Amazon was an online bookstore for a very long time before they started doing all this other stuff. What if now isn't the right time to do this other stuff, and that now is the right time to focus on the core, ride sharing and maybe some food delivery?
Well, we've been in the ride sharing business for a long time as well, and that business is absolutely developing, and its profitability is developing. We're the top player in every single market in which we compete in, and generally we're either holding share or taking share in those marketplaces. So we have a core business that provides the framework for us to build multi-billion-dollar opportunities, and I think it'll be criminal if we don't take advantage of that. You are seeing more and more apps and companies that are building ecosystems, super apps, so to speak, especially in the East, for example, in China. We believe
you've got
that
Grab trying to do a super app, Tencent, of course, with Weibo. Is that a way to think about
the super apps are winning.
The future?
Yeah, the super apps are winning, and we can be the super app of transportation, so to speak, that allows us to acquire customers at much cheaper rates than our competitors. It allows us to keep customers because we have a deeper relationship with them. And we think long-term, if you can acquire customers and keep them longer, that's just the winning formula.
Uber Eats is what, 20, 30% of the business now?
Yes, and growing very quickly. In the last quarter, bookings grew over 90% on a year-on-year basis. We're the largest global player out there. And we continue, and the category of food, we believe, can be as large or even larger than the ride-sharing category. So we love that business, and we continue to invest in it.
So there are so many competitors that do exactly what you do in this market and in other markets. What if you're just subsidizing our meals and you don't win the market share, and this is just a giant hungry money pit?
So early on, I think people could have accused the rides business of the same. It turns out that the rides business, you see it with ourselves, you see it with Lyft, et cetera, it is moving towards a path of profitability. As you build these businesses, when the potential is so big, there is some subsidization that goes into the marketplace in order to create efficiencies. You need to get eaters, you need to get couriers, you need to sign up restaurants, and there's investment that's required early on. Is there competition? Absolutely. But there's always going to be competition in big categories. We have the advantage because we have hundreds of millions of consumers on the ride side that we can essentially introduce to our brand and let them know that there's more to Uber than just riding, but there's eating and other areas that you can enjoy.
Some of the businesses it seems like we hear less about, like scooters, for example. Haven't heard a lot about scooters lately. What's the likelihood you do pull out of some of these businesses? Every
business is going to have to execute and carry its weight, so to speak. We're a big believer in micromobility. It's in the early days. We believe in electric bikes. We believe in electric scooters. And increasingly, I think the mayors of the large cities all around the world are going to want to be interested in ways of moving people around that don't pollute, that don't create traffic, and we believe micromobility can be part of the solution.
Our exclusive interview there with Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi. For more reaction, I want to get to New York, where Bloomberg's Eric Newcomer is standing by and has been covering Uber now for many, many years. So, Eric, curious what stood out to you there. I found it interesting that he didn't indicate Uber would be pulling back anywhere, but that it was scale and more scale that would lead them to profitability.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fundamental challenge of Uber that it needs to be a growth company to excuse the great losses, but then it needs to cut those losses at the same time. So that's the challenge Dara faces, and so I mean, clearly the hope is that, the ride-sharing business starts to contribute more and spend it elsewhere. And they talk a lot about, being like Amazon, but we just have to see that happen. I mean, it was a $5 billion plus GAAP net loss in the last quarter, so that's on top of everybody's mind right now.
And Uber has said over and over again that was an unusual quarter and that we won't see that kind of loss in the company's lifetime. That said, shares are still trading near an all-time low. They rose slightly today, but why aren't investors buying this?
I think especially with the economy being uncertain, stocks down overall over the last couple of weeks, I think there's sort of some concern about, there's a lot of belief that goes into Uber. You have to believe that there's other investors who are going to give it a long leash to sort of complete its vision. And I think in a time of uncertainty, is there the appetite to bet on Uber when there's so many risks?
Do you buy the argument that Uber is recession-proof?
I think he makes a smart point that it's a two-sided marketplace, and so if customers want to spend less, drivers might work for less. But I think there's the question of how little can you pay drivers, right? I mean, there's already so much pushback on Uber. In California, we're seeing movement from Uber to suggest its own sort of minimum income to counter legislation. So I think, in places where Uber's locking in the minimum bound of how much it can pay drivers, how responsive can it be on employment? And then as he sort of brought up, there are still concerns. Drivers have to get quality cars to provide the Uber service. And if those cars cost more money in down economic times, or it's harder for drivers to buy those cars, then it shortens labor supply. So there are all sorts of factors. Uber's been able to see this play out around the world. So they know a little bit more than us, sort of looking at one country or the next. But I don't think it's a certainty that they're recession-proof.
This is the first time we're hearing from Dara Khosrowshahi since the federal charges against Anthony Levandowski. What did you make of his comments about Levandowski and also Travis Kalanick?
I was certainly surprised that Khosrowshahi said up front that it seemed like Levandowski had taken files from Google. Khosrowshahi was very clear that he thought Uber had done its part to make sure those files didn't come to Uber. But it was a pretty blunt statement. And, he also made the point that this happened before he was CEO. But it's amazing, now years since Levandowski resigned, that this is still going to hang over Uber. This trial will be covered. And this is sort of a big Silicon Valley moment. And it does signal to me that Uber's past isn't totally behind it, that it's, controversies could still come back up. And this is a big example of that.
So what are the things that you are going to be watching to see if Uber is delivering on this promise and Dara Khosrowshahi's promise to be profitable, not immediately, but eventually?
I think we need to see more data on the ride-hailing business. I really do think that there's truth to what Uber says in that it's about breaking out the businesses, right? Nobody should expect them to be profitable in Eats right now while they're competing with DoorDash and it's a growth business. I think the real question is, does Uber really provide enough granularity to understand that its old businesses can be as profitable as it says? And I don't think we truly understand that. There isn't sort of the breakout in the prospectus of, okay, here's London, we've been in here X number of years, here's when it started to monetize. I think there's a lot that we still could understand about the ride-hailing business and its profitability, and that's really what I'm going to watch to understand that bigger question. Can they show in the core old business that it works?
All right, Bloomberg's Eric Newcomer, who covers Uber for us. Thank you so much for that analysis. Coming up, President Trump has promised to relax restrictions on Huawei. The company's vice president, Tim Danks, explains why the Chinese telecom giant should not be on the list. Next, this is Bloomberg. The favorite date of Apple fans worldwide has been announced, and this year it is September 10th. That is when Apple is unveiling its newest iPhones and potentially a slew of other products. They'll all go down at the Steve Jobs Theater at the company's headquarters in Cupertino. Bloomberg has reported 3 new iPhones will be unveiled. Well, earlier this year, President Trump blacklisted Chinese smartphone maker Huawei amid escalating trade tensions. As a result, multiple U.S. companies stopped doing business with the telecom giant immediately. Now, President Trump has stated he would relax the restrictions, but an actual reprieve has seemed doubtful. Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde and Scarlett Fu spoke with Tim Danks, Huawei Vice President of Risk Management and Partner Relations. They asked what the U.S. is losing out on with these restrictions in place.
I think if we look at the global smartphone market and you talk to some of our customers, very loyal customers over many years, you'll find that the products that we're offering are superior products with high quality and all the features and functionality of all the other flagship phones at a significantly competitive price. And I think that's something that consumers are missing out here in the U.S., both in the smartphone area as well as other products and technologies that we sell and support.
So if you could be a little more specific on that, because one big issue we have in the U.S., of course, is the lack of broadband access for people in rural parts of the country, partly because companies don't want to pay for it. Why is it advantageous for rural communities in particular to use Huawei gear? What's the sales pitch there?
Well, I mean, there's a few reasons. Frankly, there's over 24 million consumers in the areas that Huawei covers. We provide technology and capabilities for these operators in these regions because of our experience, many years of experience in rural China, building out the rural Chinese technology or the communications networks. So as we go forward, we're able to provide that expertise both in the product solutions that we offer that are scalable, both to high levels to large customers, but also to the small customers, along with our services and support that we customize based on the needs of the customers. The rural customers have a small customer base themselves and are limited in their funding and capabilities and resources. So we help fill that gap.
And a headline that just crossed a couple minutes ago, Caroline, is that U.S. prosecutors are investigating Huawei on new allegations of technology theft. This is according to people familiar with the matter, so potentially expanding their probe beyond existing criminal cases against Huawei.
This, of course, wrapped into the issue of stealing intellectual property, which is the main accusation. And I want to ask you, therefore, Mr. Danks, the new additional instances of alleged technology theft, is this something that's new to you? You're hearing it. How are you responding to prosecutors, and are you in day-to-day touch with prosecutors and the U.S. government?
Well, I mean, I can't really comment on ongoing litigation, and I believe that that information is related to those investigations. What I can say is Huawei is a leader in IP. We have over 90,000 patents globally. We have 20% of the global 5G essential patents, and we're a proponent of fair and equal licensing and so on. We license over $6 billion worth of IP from other companies, and we also sublicense our IP out to other countries and other companies at about $1.4 billion annually. So, we're concerned about IP theft as much as anyone because we do hold a significant number of patents, and we'd like to, see those issues addressed. But we are a proponent of due process and handling of IP in appropriate manners.
Tim, final question to you. We've seen many of your U.S. suppliers, whether it's Micron or Intel, finding loopholes, ways to get around the ban on selling to you. What sorts of negotiations are you having with these U.S. suppliers?
Well, primarily our ongoing communication with our U.S. suppliers is just that. It's our continued partnership with these suppliers. I think the concern that we have going forward is related to the impact this is going to have on the U.S. economy. We're talking about $11 billion annually spent by Huawei on goods and services in the U.S. with U.S. companies. That's a significant amount of dollars in the U.S. economy, but it also translates into a large number of jobs. If you look at economic indicators, that's equating to somewhere between 40 and 50,000 jobs that would be affected. And these are not just typical manufacturing. These are highly paid, highly skilled jobs in the American economy that at a time when, you know, there's some question about where the stability of the American economy.
That was Huawei Vice President of Risk Management and Partner Relations, Tim Danks. Still ahead, could Instagram make Facebook the king of e-commerce? We will dig into the numbers and find out. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Two of the biggest names in the technology world sparred Thursday on subjects ranging from the dangers of artificial intelligence to the future of education and the exploration of Mars. Sharing a stage at the World AI Conference in Shanghai, Alibaba chair Jack Ma took a shot at Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk's Mars dreams. Take a listen.
I'm not that fond of the Mars because I think it's easy to go to the Mars when you go on the top of the hills or of the building. Just one step, you go to Mars, but you will never be able to come back.
Yeah,
so that's my view.
That's not how it works, though.
We need heroes like you, but we need more heroes like us, working hard on the Earth, improving things every day. That's what I want.
On the subject of artificial intelligence, Ma is betting humans will prevail over machines, while Musk fears doomsday is coming. Meantime, Facebook is already the biggest social network on the planet, but could it soon be the #1 name in e-commerce? Let's think about it. Facebook's marketplace already has more than 800 million visitors a month. That is more than the number of shoppers at Alibaba, Amazon, and eBay. And its secret weapon may be Instagram. Bloomberg Intelligence believes Instagram's checkout shopping feature could surpass $1 billion in just its first year. Couple that with a survey by Sumo Heavy that says 10 to 20% of internet users are willing to shop directly on social media platforms. To discuss, Bloomberg Tech's Kurt Wagner, who covers Facebook for us, is here. Now, what has the actual progress of e-commerce on Instagram been thus far?
We don't know because they've rolled out this checkout feature just a few months ago, actually. And the idea is not even that Facebook's taking a cut of these sales. It's just facilitating the transaction, and the reason they do it is they hope that advertisers will then spend more on advertising, if they feel that they can actually convert a sale on the app. So that's kind of always been Facebook's thing. They've gotten into commerce, but always with this vision that it just leads to more ad dollars for them.
And yet, when you open Instagram, you're doing something very different than when you open Amazon. You go to Amazon and you're intending to buy. When you go to Instagram, you're just checking your feed.
Yeah,
do you want to buy something?
It's similar to Pinterest in the sense that it's like an inspiration play, right? You're scrolling through feed, maybe you're not actually shopping, but you're in a mindset where you're ready to explore something new. And so I think that's both the good and bad of Instagram, is that it doesn't have the intent that Amazon does. You don't go there specifically to buy something. At the same time, you might be convinced based on just the feeling that you have going through your feed that, hey, those shoes look cool or that shirt looks cool.
Now, meantime, something we talk less often about is Facebook Marketplace, which is sort of like Craigslist on Facebook, but you're dealing with your friends and friends of friends, and that's supposedly going very well.
I've heard the same. I don't know the exact numbers. I think you said 800 million people use it, which is kind of crazy. Every time I go on there, it does look like a little bit of a yard sale situation, but I've sold things on there, and I've actually had incredible success in getting people to, reach out, much more than Craigslist. And so I don't know how much of it is just the social dynamic of being able to see someone's photo who you're talking to, use a service like Messenger that feels more familiar than emailing some kind of random email that happens with Craigslist. But it does seem to hit a need, which is there's a lot of people with extra stuff, a lot of people looking to buy stuff in the neighborhood. Might as well put them together if we already know who they are.
Now, Facebook has been trying to unify the infrastructure of its messaging services under the same sort of roof. How would all of these commerce services potentially come together?
Well, I think there's a huge customer service play to this, right? I mean, anytime you buy something online, you usually get maybe maybe an email receipt. Then if you have customer service issues, you have to go to the website. You have to figure out who to call or who to message. It's a little disjointed right now. So imagine if you could go into a retailer, you could pay, and then basically have that whole process through a messaging service. I think that is part of the vision. I don't think that's the whole thing, but I do think they see a potential for kind of taking those different parts of the online shopping experience and putting them into a place you're already familiar with.
And could this be a good news story and in a sea of bad news stories about Facebook?
Too soon, right? I mean, like, again, they don't take cuts of this stuff. So right now it just creates more traction, creates more use case for people and advertisers. We'll see if they actually put some dollar signs behind it at some point.
All right, Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner, who covers Facebook for us. Thank you so much. Interesting context there. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We're live streaming on Twitter. You can find us there at Technology. And be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.